Hello again, and welcome back to Higher Maths, Functions and Graphs, Graph Transformations. And today we are going to, or in this lesson, we're going to have a look at reflection. So reflection is the same type of reflection you were doing in primary school. It's basically flipping something upside down or left or right, but we are going to reflect in either the x or the y-axis here. So again, we have these two graphs. We have a cubic graph and a trigonometric graph. And we're just going to look at transforming them. So we just need to remember what these look like. So these are on separate pages to the reflection graphs. So taking our original graph, or the original cubic graph, y equals negative f of x reflects the graph of f of x in the x-axis. So originally the graph was coming down, touching at -1, going back up to here, coming down, crossing at 3 and dropping. So the whole graph has been reflected in the x-axis, and to do that we do y equals negative f of x, or in this case y equals negative g of x. And again here negative sine x reflects the sine graph in the x-axis. So instead of coming up, then down, minimum turning point at 270 and back up, it's basically upside down as it has been reflected in the x-axis. Now how do we reflect something in the y-axis? Well, f of negative x would reflect a graph in the y-axis. So here f of negative x, the original graph, remember, came down here, back up at p comma q, and crossed at 3. So the whole thing has been reflected in the y-axis. And again, here's a sine graph which normally comes along here and back up. And again, that whole graph has been reflected in the y-axis. And to do that, we do y equals f of negative x, or in this case, g of negative x. So a couple more examples. So we have y equals x squared. So y equals negative x squared should reflect the graph in the x-axis, and indeed it does. So we also have y equals x cubed minus x, which we looked at in the last video. And we're going to look at y equals negative g of x, which will reflect the graph on the x-axis, which it does. Y equals x minus 2 all squared. So remember that will be a parabola that has moved 2 to the right, so the minimum turning point will be at 2, 0. And by doing y equals negative of x minus 2 all squared, that again will reflect the graph in the x-axis, like so. And as we've seen in the note, this also occurs for trigonometric graphs. Indeed, it occurs for any graph. So cos x, negative cos x. Okay. And there we go. And what I have not done, let's have a look at sine of negative x. Oops. So there's sine x. So sine of negative x should reflect the whole graph in the y-axis, as it would do any graph. And there it is. It does reflect it in the y-axis. Okay, so that is reflection. And just summarizing, negative f of x, a reflection in the x-axis, that's a change in the y-coordinate. F of negative x is a reflection in the x-axis. In the y-axis, sorry, f of negative x reflects the graph in the y-axis, and it is the x-coordinate that changes when that happens.